Okay, so please make sure you are able to set up a default org in your VS Code. So open your VS Code, open the project which you wanted to access, and after the project is loaded, make sure you're able to connect your developer edition to this org. Durai, he has done it. Okay. Durai, can you make sure everyone else in Casadera has completed that step, like able to connect their developer edition?
Sure, sir.
Yeah, yes, sir.
I'll check.
And Sanjana, Mahesh, can you make sure you guys are all able to connect to your developer edition via VS Code?
I've connected my org to the VS Code. Yes.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Can you make sure others also
Yes.
did the same?
Yep. Yeah. I'll be on it.
Okay, great.
Riyaz, one question here, in the code, right? Intelligence is not prompting it. Is there anything we need to add, install it? Say, for
Yes.
instance, basically object name or like any conversion. If you want to do it, we need to explicitly try it out and then add it.
Yeah, so there is a Salesforce extension pack.
Okay.
There's one expanded pack. You install this, and Einstein. There is one pack for Salesforce for Einstein. You must install this. Agentforce for
Salesforce
developers.
for Einstein. Okay.
Agentforce for developers. Just make sure it is installed as well. This will generate code.
Okay.
I'll put it in the chat anyway. Okay, Samuel, are you able to connect your developer edition from VS Code?
Yes, sir. I have done it.
Perfect. Amina, are you able to connect?
Yes, sir. I'm able to.
Good. Rupan?
Yes, sir. I have connected.
You connected. That is good. Yeah, like whoever has done, that's great.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Yes, Rupan, go ahead.
Sir, I want to talk about the exception in triggers.
Sure. Okay.
How could we handle the exception in triggers? Yesterday you done.
Okay. So I'm just opening the before trigger. Okay. So so we tried the try catch, right? Apex exception.
Yes, sir.
Okay, one second. Okay. So generally exception handling, I'll go with this. So this is very similar to one that we have in Java. Okay. So you do the try catch. Okay. And whenever you can throw an exception, if it is of this exception type, process this way, right? And if you want to throw something return a value or based on how the Apex is invoked, you can return some exceptions as well. You can throw some exceptions. Okay. If it is called from LWC, you can throw an or exception. Okay. So that way, you are throwing an exception to LWC. Okay. Whenever LWC is invoking Apex, you can throw it. But in trigger, you can do this normal try catch to handle the exceptions. There are multiple exception types. I'll try to share the list if there is anything. And we do have options to create custom exceptions. I believe this is available in most of the, like in Java as well. Okay. So you just extend the exception and then you can process how your exception to be captured. What companies usually do, like they create a log for exception. Whenever an exception has been thrown, they will try to capture that in a log for storing the data, and then will analyze or process it later. Okay. And if you have any specific question on the exception, let me know, Ruben. We'll talk about that.
Sir, I want to know about in after trigger, sir.
In after trigger. Okay. Yeah, like after trigger or before trigger, right? Exception handling is same. You go with the try catch. Okay. The differences between before trigger, after trigger is in before trigger, the data is not like, updated in the database. Like the record is not saved in the database. Okay. The ID would not be there in case of insert. Okay. And any auto number fields will not have value in case of insert. If it is update, the ID would be there and the auto number values all will be there. Why you want to know about after trigger? Are you trying any use case and having a challenge?
Sir, yesterday you talked, I tried in my laptop.
Okay.
So I'm think of how could we handle exception in this triggers. Just a random thought.
Understood. So to handle it, we use the try catch. Okay. And there is something called Apex exception. We generally throw it from triggers. Okay. Sorry, not Apex exception, throw error. Okay. Trigger. Yeah, there is add error method. This is what I was looking for. So here, like if there is a problem in a particular record, we have option to add error message to that record so that the system will throw an error to the UI. Like it will show an error in the UI. This is one way you can, handle any exception and show error to the customers, to the user, basically. Okay. At the record level, you add or you use the add error method. This is just a method in the instance. Okay. This is accessible in triggers. You can do it in trigger. And even though you can do it in the before trigger, generally all validation happens in before trigger. Whatever I want to check, whatever I want to validate, okay, everything happens in before trigger. All the follow-up processes, right, or activities or tasks are performed in after trigger. Before is for validations, like, making sure like, the data is sanitized or data is, secured, or it is like integrity of the data is like, in place. Any other business checks to happen. All of those validation happens in before trigger. After trigger is basically activities that needs to happen. Like when we order, this is one scenario, right? When we onboard an employee, we send a welcome email, right? We create a bank account, we provide systems, like so. Such a set of activities are handled in after trigger. You can add error. I'll take this example. Email address is not equal to null. Okay, if it is null, what we can see is emp dot add error. Please provide email address. So this way we can throw error to the record. In the UI, system will show this error. Please provide email address. Save or this is good. And if you still have any challenges, you can do the try catch. Okay. Try send email. If there is any exception, catch exception. You can handle exceptions like this. And you can choose to create a log, send an email to the developer, or create some or throw some error messages. Like this we can do. Save record. Get message. Does that make sense, Ruben?
Yeah, sir. It's good.
Yeah. But again, that's a very good question. Like you can refer the exceptions in Apex link. This part of the developer guide only. So just go through it. If you have anything that you're not able to understand in this, let me know. We can discuss.
Okay, sir.
Good. Yes. So what were we talking about? Sorry. Okay. Apply controller. This is different. Okay. Yeah. So please make sure you're able to connect to a developer org, your developer edition org. Okay. Today I wanted to talk about testing Apex. This is what I wanted to discuss today, and the importance of code coverage. Like what is code coverage in Apex? Why we need it? Okay, and how we can create test classes or unit test in Apex. Okay, so we are building applications, right? And Salesforce is a multi-tenant architecture. So they want their systems to be secured, and also they want to make sure their system resources are not over-consumed, right? And to also they want to make sure the applications are stable. There are no infinite loops, or there are no any security violations malfunctioning, all those things they wanted to avoid. Okay. And as we build applications, okay, it is always good to ensure your application is stable. Like stability of the application is very important. Okay. For example, earlier days, we used to have a social media application like Orkut and all, right? And there are so many search engines were there. Like the stability of the application plays a very big role on the user adoption. Okay, if the app is not stable, if the app is not behaving consistently well, the user adoption would be a very challenge. Okay, so every application, everyone try to do a stability check. Hey, my application is working as expected. Okay, one way of doing that is unit testing. Okay, as soon as the developer builds any feature, any code, any function, okay, it is expected to be unit tested. This is very critical because it ensures the system is stable, and stable system is very important for user adoption. Okay, so we used to talk about this point, like, how data is very crucial, and without data, there is no need for any applications, right? Similarly, you have data, you have apps, you need to have users, right? Even though I might have, like, a beautiful application, if there are no users to the application, there is no point or no value to this, right? I have data. If it is not making any sense to me, the apps that we are building is of no use. Okay. So similarly, apps require users. Okay. So always keep this, like, importance, your data, application, user. So because of this users are very important. So your user experience is important. Stability is important. Okay. At the application, security is important. You cannot, like, expose every data to everyone and all. Okay. Here, integrity is important at the data level. Okay. Like, it's not just integrity. It has to make sure, like, it's the data is accuracy. Accuracy is also important. This is correct. Anyway, so testing brings stability to applications. Okay. And I'm not sure you guys would have heard about this. Google, Facebook, and all, they run some programs called the bounty programs. Basically, uh, um, they will reward you if you find a bug in their application. People find loopholes in the applications, and if you find such loopholes, you get rewarded from, like, big companies. The reason being, like, they want to make sure their application is stable and secure. Okay. And Salesforce being they're number one in the SaaS industry because they are fast and fast to market. They're very secured. They're like, number one in trust, no data violations. Okay. And you can build applications faster. That's why they are, like, being a market leader for 2.5 decades almost. Okay. So unit testing brings a lot of value. So, like, this adds, like, this adds more governance in the application that we are developing. Okay. So Salesforce enforces minimum of 75% of code coverage in all the Apex classes that we develop. Okay. Okay, I don't know why minimum 75%, because, like, some edge cases are very complex to replicate. So, they are generously keeping it only 75%. Okay. So whatever applications that we are building, we need to test it, and minimum 75% of code coverage is needed. If we take our employee controller, this is a class that we built. Okay. In order for this to be deployed to production, the system will expect at least 75% of the code is covered. Okay. Otherwise, the system will not accept this to be deployed to production. You can manage everything in sandbox, no problem. Not to go to the production org, it requires minimum 75% of code coverage. Okay. That means we have written some scenarios validating that 75% of the code is, like, tested. The system is more stable and secured. Okay. Let's see how we can improve code coverage for this. So in the system, I'm just logging into the system developer edition org. And we have Apex test execution. this page will tell you what are all the code coverages that has applied or like that are currently in place for each class. Okay, so right now we don't have any test class, 0 test class written in this org. Okay, we'll try to create one test class and see how we can define the data, what is needed, and how we can cover the number of lines in the code. Okay. And also test class is also a class. Okay, we create test class, which is nothing but an Apex code only. We don't need to do a code coverage for test classes. Test class. Okay. I'm creating a class. Okay. So we have to make sure the class has this annotation. Without this annotation, this annotation defines the class that we are writing, the Apex code that we are writing is for testing. Okay. And if we have this annotation, that means for this code, we don't have to write code coverage. Okay. This is at the class level. And even at the method level, we can define like this is how we define a method inside the class. So we are defining one method. Let's call it as new employee test. New employees scenario. So now we have just defined one test method, okay, in the Apex test class. So here we are, okay, let me tell what scenario that we are trying to cover. We are trying to cover create employee, new employee scenario. Okay. In order to do that, what I am doing is I'm creating an instance of the employee controller. EC equal to new employee controller and EC dot create employee test. Because create employee currently accept only one parameter. So I'm just passing that one parameter. Okay. And now this is one scenario which I wanted to test. For my input is test. I'm just want to run it and see how much of code it has covered. What is the whether the function executed successfully or not. I want to check. I'm deploying this code. Okay, I made it static. So let's. Okay. So since the method is static as part of LWC, I made static. So I no longer need to instantiate to access static method. So I'm directly accessing the method, passing the input. Okay. So one, I can go to this Apex test execution to run test class. Okay, run. So it is running a test class and there are no method. There are like one method and it didn't pass. Okay. My test class failed. I'll show the error and see how we can rectify this. You go to the developer console to understand what is the test class outcome is. There is a test tab. this will cover all your test runs. Now in the new employee test, it has failed on line number 26. Okay, under create employee, line number 26, it had failed. The reason for failure is there are no rows for assignment to S object. Okay, I'll explain why it failed, and then we'll see how we can fix this. I just want to put a hold here. Okay. Have you guys done any testing? You guys would have done a project in your colleges and all, right? Have you guys done testing to your project? If you guys have experience, you would have done some project work. Have you done unit testing? I can talk for another 30 minutes and I can disconnect this call, but it is of no use for you and it is of no value for me. Have you guys done unit testing? All of you are programmers, right? All of you have written programs. Abdullah, have you done any unit testing?
Oh,
No,
sir.
sir.
Okay. Have you used W3 schools?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what do you practice in W3 schools? Like whatever that I'm trying, let's say I want to see, I'll take this, try it yourself. Okay. Anything I learn, okay, this is a program. Okay. When I say, okay, H1 is, this is heading coming. I want to see what H2 looks like, right? This is one. Okay. So I just tested whether my HTML works fine or not, right? This is very simple unit testing. Okay. Like if you're going to purchase new clothes, right? We do unit testing. Basically, we imagine how we look with this dress. Do we look good with this? Do we look bad? Is it of too much contrast to my skin tone? Like we do all sort of checks. All sort of checks are unit test for us. Okay. So any program that you write, your validation that the program works is unit testing. You have people have or here has been in lead code, right? In that platform, you guys do unit testing. You cannot say I have not done unit testing. Who all have access to lead code? Who have account in lead code?
I have.
Yes. Have you validated your program? Tested your program there?
What, sir?
Have you tested your program in lead code?
Yes, sir. There are
Yes.
some test cases are visible and lot of test cases are non-visible for test our code.
Okay. Okay. So, as a programmer, okay, so we do the check, so, when our moms cook at home, right? They taste the food. That's basically unit testing, making sure the salt is good. There's no problem with the food that they are preparing. Okay. So all those are sample testing. Now in programs, as a developer, as we develop, we make sure the code works. Okay. And there are multiple scenarios to validate in every program that you write. If I take this program, okay, I'll make one change that so that way all data equal to true. So if I add this tag, the error we will rectify first, and we'll talk about the scenarios to be tested. I think the tag is syntax is correct. Syntax is correct. Let me run this. File, test, new run. I'll choose the method to run. Method run, so it still fails. That's bad. Okay. So here, please provide email address. I added this before trigger, right? Employee before trigger. Controller. Where did I add this? Please provide email address. Okay, in the after trigger, I'm throwing an error. If there is no email address, I'm throwing an error. So the system is failing. The unit test scenario is failing because I didn't provide the email address. And because of this error, my test classes are failing. Just for testing, I will comment this out. Deploy the source to org. Let me run my test class again. Test. New run with the test class unit test method I want to test. So now it shows the test method is passed. Okay. And this is the class that it covered the testing. Open class employee controller. In the developer console, we have the option to view what code is covered. By clicking on the code coverage, we can say what lines of code are covered. Okay. Now, whichever in red, these lines are not covered. Whichever in blue, these lines are covered. Okay. Here it also gives option which test method is covering what code. So employee controller test.new employee test, it covers 40% of the class. Basically, system.debugs anyway is not covered. So we invoked this method with a value and it is able to check the scenario. Okay, the system validated this code. It ran. Okay. Now, by doing this, we have validated the trigger as well, like file open triggers employee after trigger. See, we have validated the trigger code as well, because as part of this statement, whenever a record get inserted, the triggers get executed. Okay. And as the trigger get executed, this line of code is validated. Make sure this line works. Okay. Now line number 7 to 14 or 15, this is not validated at all. Can you guys tell me on what scenario this code will get validated? What should I do for this code to get covered?
Sure, after trigger.
This is after trigger, yes.
We need to give email address.
Correct. We need to give email address. So in the test data, whatever that we are using for create employee, we have to make sure email address is provided. If there is a value in the email address, this piece of code would be executed. Okay. So let's go edit, create a new method in the test class. Okay. Test employee with email. Okay. Static test method. Void email test. New employee email test. Okay. Now we can test, like triggers can be tested via record creation. Okay. I'll just create one record. E equal to new pharmacy employee. Okay. I'll give employee name, email test. I'll give email address, email test@test.com. Okay, I'll give mobile number equal to and what is one more field that we need to provide? Checks, pharmacy employees, ID, employee name, query. Okay, so all I'm trying to do is I'm creating one employee record. Okay, and this would invoke my trigger after trigger. And since I provided the email address, the scenario or the code which says a value is needed at the employee record, this would get covered in the test method. Deploy this. Got deployed. Let me run the test method. Test, new run. We choose the method. Okay, I'm just running. My test failed. So it is expecting a required field. Pharmacy is a required field. I cannot create a record without pharmacy. Okay. See, in the employee controller, what we did, we retrieved a pharmacy and we provided the pharmacy in the account. So the insertion happened successfully, no problem. But in the test scenario, what we are trying to do is we try to create a record without account. Okay. So when this insert PE happens, we have to do try catch. Okay. This is negative scenario testing, but we need to do it. Okay. And we have to validate, are we getting this error? Required field missing. See. Okay. System dot that equals e dot message contains. Contains required fields are missing. Okay. There is an exception. We can say p dot. I'll create a new account. Let's see, equal to new account. Name equal to test pharmacy. P dot pharmacy underscore C equal to pharmacy dot ID. Now do an insert P. Okay, so I'm trying to create an account. Right, first I have to insert account, and then use that on the pharmacy and then insert pharmacy. Use account and create employee. So ideally this should go inside on the exception route. Okay. Let me deploy this source code. Trying to create an account. Let's see whether this goes through. Test. Like if I excited a method already, I can just do rerun. It saves time. Okay. Now this method has completed successfully. Okay. If I go back to the triggers and if I can choose which method did my code coverage. So new employee email test covered 77% of the code. My earlier method, new employee test, covered only 22% of the code. But this method, new method, covered 77% of the code. If I have to cover 100%, what should I do? There are only 2 lines I missed. Any guess? How can I ensure these 2 lines are covered? What scenario should I do to cover this scenario, cover this code?
Not giving address or subject in the email manager.sendmail.
Fantastic. Yes. If I don't give first we need to understand how email manager is built, right? Here, are we throwing any exception? Right now, there are no exceptions thrown, right? If I don't provide an address here, it will throw an exception. Okay. And we can capture that. But in this case, in this employee after trigger, we cannot control any of this because we are saying this is the body, this is the subject, all the values are pre-built. If it is not null, we don't even come into the scenario. So covering this catch would be very tricky. It's tough. Okay. But you can cover it by making sure your email manager send email here. Okay. You can add some conditions and say, okay, if this condition happens, throw an exception, and that exception can be useful to caught or get this code. Okay. So the idea is, in order to do the code coverage, okay, you need to understand what logic you have implemented. Okay. First thing, we implemented a create employee logic. So we built one simple test method to call that method. That's all. Okay. And to get additional code coverage, like for employee manager class, do you think we have did some coverage in this class by writing this 2 methods? Do you think any code in this class is covered? It's okay. Yes or no only. Raja, is this any code covered till now or no?
No, sir.
Okay. So let me open the class. Email manager. This is the class. Okay. So here 93% of the code got covered. Okay. The reason being this is invoked from our after trigger. And if you see new employee email test only did a code coverage here, and the new employee test, it didn't cover it. It had only 13% coverage, but the new employee email test where we have provided value for the email that invoked this method. And because this invoke method is invoked, this function code is executed. And there are no problems with this code. If there is a problem, the system would have failed there. Okay. So the more we understand what logic we have put, it's easier to test it. If we don't understand the logic, it is very tough to test. And whether we like it or not, Salesforce enforces 75% of code coverage for all your Apex code. Triggers doesn't need that much coverage, but all the other Apex classes require 75% of code to be covered. Otherwise, the method will never be deployed to production. Now, employee controller, we are fortunate that, okay, it's only 40% covered. Yeah, because we have not written any other functions. Okay, open employee controller, it is only 40% covered. This method will never get deployed to production. Okay. Email manager, 93% covered. We will not have any problem deploying this. Okay. And after trigger, for triggers, at least 1% to be covered. Since it is more than 1%, the trigger will get deployed. Employee controller will never go to production. Okay. What should I do to make sure employee controller also gets to production? How can I increase code coverage in employee controller?
Write test case for update employee function.
Okay, makes sense. So we have to write test method where we invoke a scenario, or like for a scenario where this method is invoked and this method is invoked. Okay. So going to the test class, okay. Now here we are inserting a employee here, right? And can I invoke employee controller, read all employees, employee controller, or I can do it after this. After this create employee, read the newly created employee. Employee controller is equal to new employee controller EC dot read employees.
I think we again do the same problem where
Sorry?
we define it as static or not.
No, actually, I didn't. I'm just making use of the existing method because in this method, we created an employee record. Okay. When we do the read employees, the system will fetch this record. So I didn't create new method. So any test method that you create, this is the syntax we have to follow. It has to be static test method void. There is another method called the test data setup. Okay, that is used to build the data that we need. Loading test data. So we have option to create test data. 1 second. This is not load. Sorry, test setup. So we use this test setup to create test data. This is additional, annotation that we use. Okay, this is executed every time. Like this is executed first. Okay, if there is a test method in a test class, the test setup will get executed first, and then the methods get executed. So this test setup will help us create the necessary data needed for testing. Okay. If I take in our scenario, the test setup would be to create a pharmacy. That is my test setup. We need to have a pharmacy, right? For any sort of testing. So setup can be to create a simple pharmacy record. But other than that, every test method should have static test method keywords. Otherwise, the method is not considered as test method. For this, we need to have a code coverage. Just creating a pharmacy as part of the test setup, which is this. Okay. Okay, so let me just, so for read employees, we need to pass one account ID. That's how the method is defined. So it requires one account ID. Okay, so we need to capture this account ID, the pharmacy ID. What's this? And we use the pharmacy dot ID. Okay. Now, the scenario, what we are covering is we are creating an employee and then we are accessing read employees to get the data from the database. Deploy this.
Yes, it has the return type, right? We need to mention it, or like we can just invoke it.
Cannot get this. Sorry, what was the question?
No, read employees, it has the return type, right?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Thanks for that. We can capture it. Let's do this. Okay, system.asset has 2. Okay, this one. Yeah, so I'm just ensuring whether the size is greater than 0. Okay. If you guys notice, earlier we had see all data true. Now I removed see all data true. Okay. The see all data, what that flag does is it allows the test class to access existing data in the database. If we remove see all data equal to true, what it means is you don't access the existing data in the database, rather you create your own data. See, the test classes are invoked during deployment. Okay. For example, let's say I'm doing a development in, okay, let's call it as dev1 org. Okay. And if I go to move to production org, during the code movement from dev1 to production only, the test classes are executed. Okay. And the data might exist in dev1 org, the data might exist in production. The data need not to be same. Here I can have 100 pharmacies. Here I can have 1 lakh pharmacies. Okay. And we cannot expect the data to exist that we used in our test class to exist in production. Okay. So Salesforce, some scenarios suggest to use see all data true, but it always recommends to set up our own data. Okay. So earlier I used the see all data just to make this scenario pass because we are reading the data from the database. Okay. Now what we did is we created that pharmacy as a test record, and this get inserted in the system. All the test record are not stored in the database. It is temporary. This record you will never find in the system. The test email test.test.com email test, this test user, none of them are not stored in the database at all. Okay, so anything that we run from test are not stored in database. So let me deploy this. The test class we are deploying, let's just run the test class. Test new run. And okay, test methods passed. We can see whether employee controller. Now our code coverage is 60%. Okay, so the read employees, all the lines of code are covered. Create employee, all the lines of code are covered. Update all employees is not covered yet. Okay, what should I do to get this code covered scenario? You guys don't want to close the session? Okay. I'll call this like how we invoked read employees. Let's invoke update all as well. C dot update all employees. It requires one parameter, passing that parameter. So update all employees, we pass one pharmacy ID. Okay, that's all. And does it return anything? No, it is just void. Apply the source to org. Test rerun is ran successfully. Now we got 96% of the code covered because all of this code were executed as part of our test class. And only the error scenario was not covered. Okay. So whatever test classes that you guys have written, try to do code coverage for it as a practice. Okay. That will help you guys understand what sort of test methods that we can create. I'll stop here. Okay, so this is the overview that I want you guys to remember. Every Apex class requires test class. Okay, you need minimum 75% of code coverage. Without that 75% code coverage, you cannot deploy the code to production. You can deploy everything else like your objects, fields, flows. Flows doesn't require code coverage. There are no code concept. So flows, everything can be deployed, but the Apex class without code coverage, it won't be deployed. LWC, there is a unit testing concept, but Salesforce is not currently enforcing any unit testing requirements for LWCs, but some organizations will enforce that. Okay. So without this, we cannot deploy Apex class to production environment. This testing is must. All good? So please create test class for the Apex class that you guys have written. All of you have written the sample Apex class. Okay. Create a test class and make sure you get the code coverage. If it is less than 75, work on it. If it is greater than 75, done. That's the bare minimum needed. I'll stop recording here.